7 questions. Was Paul married in the Bible? There is much debate over whether or not the Apostle Paul was married in the Bible. Some people believe that he was and some people believe that he was not. The truth is, we do not know for sure. He never mentions he has a wife. He mentions he has a right to a wife like the other apostles. Nothing wrong with being married, nothing wrong with being single if you can control your passions. Bible verses that hint at Paul's marital status. 1 Corinthians 9:5 King James Version. Have we not power to lead about a sister, a wife, as well as other apostles, and as the brethren of the Lord, and Cephas? American Standard Version. Have we no right to lead about a wife that is a believer, even as the rest of the apostles, and the brethren of the Lord, and Cephas? Berean Study Bible. Have we no right to take along a believing wife, as do the other apostles and the Lord's brothers and Cephas? 1 Corinthians 7:7-9 1 Corinthians 7:32-35 Paul was a Pharisee. Did the Pharisees believe in marriage? The Pharisees were a religious sect that was very influential in Judaism during the time of Jesus. People often wonder what the Pharisees believed in, especially when it comes to topics like marriage. So, did the Pharisees believe in marriage? The answer is yes. The Pharisees did believe in marriage. In fact, they held marriage in high esteem and believed that it was a sacred institution. The Pharisees also believed that divorce was wrong and should only be allowed in certain circumstances. However, not all marriages were created equal in the eyes of the Pharisees. They believed that men should marry virgins so that they could be sure that their wives were chaste. The Pharisees also believed that marriages between Jews and Gentiles were wrong and should not be allowed. See Amazon's educational resources on the Apostle Paul. What is known about Gamaliel, Paul's Pharisee teacher? The New Testament mentions Gamaliel in Acts 5:34-40 and 22-3. He was a Pharisee and a doctor of the law, held in high esteem by all the people. He was also the teacher of the Apostle Paul. So who was this man and what do we know about him? Gamaliel was born into a wealthy and influential family. His grandfather was Hillel, who was considered one of the greatest rabbis of his time. According to Jewish tradition, Gamaliel was distilled with wisdom from his birth. When he grew older, he became a rabbi himself and began teaching at the school of Hillel. Gamaliel was held in such high esteem that even Saul of Tarsus, later known as the Apostle Paul, sat at his feet to learn. Acts 22:3. When the Jews were trying to figure out what to do about the apostles preaching Jesus as the Messiah, they turned to Gamaliel for advice. His counsel was simple. If this work is of God, you will not be able to stop them. But if it is not of God, you will not be able to stop them anyway. Acts 5:39. In other words, let time prove whether or not these men are from God. Gamaliel was a Pharisee and a doctor of the law who was held in high esteem by all the people. He was also the teacher of the Apostle Paul. From what we know about him, he seems to have been a wise and level-headed man. His advice to the Jews when they were trying to figure out what to do about the apostles preaching Jesus as the Messiah was simple. If this work is of God, you will not be able to stop them. But if it is not of God, you will not be able to stop them anyway. Time would prove whether or not these men were from God. Why is it important to discuss Paul's marital status in today's society? There is a lot of discussion about relationships and marriage. People are always curious about whether or not someone is married, and if so, how many times they have been married. This curiosity extends to biblical characters as well. For example, people are often curious about Paul's marital status. Was he married? If so, why did he never mention his wife in his writings? Although Paul never explicitly states whether or not he was married, there is evidence in the Bible that Paul was most likely not married. In 1 Corinthians 7:8, Paul says that it is better to remain unmarried. Furthermore, in 1 Corinthians 9:5, Paul says that he has the right to bring his wife with him on his missionary journeys, but he does not take advantage of this right. Instead, he remains single so that he can focus on spreading the gospel. There are several reasons why it is important to discuss Paul's marital status. First, because Paul was such an influential figure in the early church, his example helped to shape the church's view on marriage. Second, discussing Paul's marital status can help us to understand his theology better. For example, if we know that Paul was not married, we can better understand why he emphasized celibacy and singleness in some of his writings. Did the early church think Apostle Paul was married? In Paul's epistles, he often speaks about singleness and marriage. He even gives instructions on how couples should behave within marriage. However, there is no mention of Paul's own marital status. This has led some to wonder if the early church thought Paul was married. God bless Gray. Father, grandfather, minister, missionary, deacon, elder, author, welcome to our family. View all posts.